A driving distraction is anything in and around the car that takes your eyes.
It's something that will either manually, visually, or mentally distract you.
A driving distraction is anything that takes your focus away.
Well, it's could be a variety of things that take away from your focus on the driving task.
Driving distraction would be anything that diverts your attention.
A driving distraction
from the driving task
that takes your attention off the road. Ooh, life events or emotions, they can be totally distracting because you get lost in your own thoughts. You know, if something's happening in your life, whether it's sad, happy, or excited, it can distract you because that's where your thought process is, and it can take that away from your driving.
Anytime something really big emotional happens in anybody's life, it can be more overwhelming than even some drugs, I would argue, from that vantage point. Recognize that if you are having a conflict with your mother, that is maybe not the best time to go practice driving with mom, because we all know that the emotions can get the best of us, and we've unfortunately seen this at a rate that's getting a little scary in our country with aggressive driving and what we now refer to as road rage. Look, at the end of the day, even when a loved one dies, you have to get your place self from point A to point B. And, you know, ideally, Uber or Lyft at that point, if you don't have a friend that can help you out, that's the ideal situation. I would never want to encourage anybody to drive in a really negative state of an emotion, but let's say it's an emergency and there's no choice around it. This is where you've got to just streamline your focus. Be pinpointed on one thing. Let's face facts. We all like to think we're good at multitasking, but none of us are. And if we put our focus into one thing and one thing only, that is usually when we're best at whatever that is. And the same thing I think goes true with driving. So if I'm behind the wheel, I'm driving at that point. I'm not thinking about what just happened. I'm thinking about getting to the destination that I need to get to in one piece.
Oh, absolutely. You could have had just a bad day at work. You're focused on your boss, you know, chewing you out or something like that, trying to drive home, and other drivers are making you angry, and maybe it vents itself in some road rage. Depression. Depression can be an overwhelming emotion. Not a good time to drive. If you have issues, I suggest you call a friend and say, hey, pick me up, let's go talk about this. But don't drive and meet someone to discuss your emotional problems of the time, especially if they're severe. If you feel you need to drive somewhere, maybe you can have a friend do it. Maybe you need some counseling, you want to talk to somebody, meet for whatever, iced tea. Have them drive. Have them pick you up. Have them drive you home. Calm yourself down before you decide to get behind the wheel.
There used to be this line of thinking that if there was something very stressful going on in your life, you went for a drive to clear your head. And that could not be a dumber thing you could do, because you need to be focusing on the driving task. You can actually kind of get lost in your own thoughts and get lost in your own world, and it only takes a split second for something disastrous to happen out there. Driving should be about driving.
Oh boy, I mean life. I think one of my favorite lines to say is, I'm like, look, life gets in the way, right? We all have plans, and then something happens. The problem is, once you get a driver's license, all of a sudden you have the ability to drive around, meaning you have to start coping with life when you're out there behind the wheel of a 3,000-pound kinetic missile. One example for me is we had a dog, my family did, and we had him for years, loved him. We had to put the dog down. I love animals, I'm not gonna lie, I cried. That's the truth, but I had to get to work right after that. And I thought to myself, when I got in my car, I didn't verbally out loud have a conversation with myself, but doing this for a living, sitting down, I was devastated. I was really sad. But I got in my car and I had to literally think to myself. And I said, okay, I have to get to work safely. I had to focus on what was most important. And then I had to get home. And I'm a human being. We can't be these emotionless drones, but you have to be able to compartmentalize your emotions. And if you're deciding to get behind the wheel of a car and you don't think you can control an emotion, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion, you shouldn't drive a car. Right, so that's a sad example, but if someone's out there and wins $1,000 on a scratch or lotto ticket, you might not want to get right behind the wheel and start driving home because you are going to be on cloud nine that you just won $1,000. right? You need to be able to compartmentalize these emotions, good, bad, angry, sad, it doesn't matter. Compartmentalize it and make sure driving is where your focus is at, and tell yourself when you get to your destination, then you can deal with those emotions.
I know that you've gone through stuff recently, but if you want to talk about it, that's fine. How are life events, emotions, how can you talk about how those can be distracting and how they affect your driving?
Sure. So throughout our life, we'll often have tragedies, life events that affect our emotions and our mind pretty heavily. Driving under these circumstances may not be the best idea. If you are so focused on this event where you almost get tunnel vision, you're not checking your mirrors, you're not checking your speed, you're angry, you're sad, you're really happy even, if you're driving in this way, you're not focused on all the things you should be doing. It may be best if you've suffered a tragedy or are experiencing a lot of emotion to ask someone else to drive, or if you can, try to find a different time or day to make that trip.